I feel like I spent most of my life both seeking what my identity was, trying to learn about my culture just from my parents, essentially, because that was the only exposure I had. And
Mm-hmm.
then also trying to understand where I fit in this other world and how I can blend in. It was so when I went to Canada, because I had learned the British English system here, the way that I pronounced certain words was very different.
Mm.
And that was something I actually got bullied about very harshly. I agree with you about the fact that we don't spend enough time about how kids are affected by certain life changes.
Yes.
I'm always advocating for kids because I know what these things did to my development.
Mm-hmm.
And at an age that you're figuring out who you are, you're figuring out the world around us, I felt like I was living on two different lives, essentially. It was really a shift that needed to happen for me of realizing that I'm overthinking it. It's actually so much easier than I expected. Change. Some people sell their house and completely like uproot their entire lives. So you you come to Canada or a place like that, and even if you regret it, even if you're like, I had no idea this is what I was signing up for,
Mm.
you're forced
You
to deal
cannot
with
go
it, right?
back.
You're forced. Like, so
Yes.
everybody thought I was crazy. I was ready to jump on a plane and come here, and they're like, what are you going to do there? I was like, protest? Like, I don't know. I don't know,
Yes.
but I just need to be there. Like, it's like, I think what's really sad about some of the situations here is that it's easier for a foreigner to come in and start a business illegally than it is for a local person to actually do it legitimately.
Oh,
So I
yes.
think, there's a lot of improvement that Sri Lanka can make, but I think it is just a hub of opportunity. I think there's so much untapped potential when it comes to what the country could be, what the government could be, what people can be, and what like careers could be for people here.
So I feel like this
Yeah.
is the time to give back to the country for those who can move. And the experience and the knowledge we bring from other parts of the world can really make changes in Sri Lanka. We can educate others. They don't necessarily have to go to another country if they don't have the means to learn, because we can educate them, we can help, we can volunteer. There is so much we can give back to our country is what I think. Hi Sarathi, so lovely to have you on this podcast series. How are you?
Hi. I'm doing well, thank you. It's nice to properly meet you.
Yeah, my pleasure to have you here, Sarathi. So, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I was born in Sri Lanka. I've lived in Canada since I was 7 years old. And it's always felt like home to me. Whenever someone said, where is home? Even though I spent most of my life in Canada, it was always Sri Lanka. So it's always been a dream of mine to come back here.
Okay, so you're so connected with the roots. The first question would be, Sarathi, as a 7-year-old child, when you moved to a whole new country, how did you feel at that age?
I think there was a mix of excitement for something new. We actually spent like 3 or 4 years going through the immigration process while in Sri Lanka, so it was something we always knew was coming. My parents put me into international school so I could like be more comfortable speaking English. So I
Mm-hmm.
think on some level, it happened to me from such a young age that I didn't really have a choice but to know that that was what was happening. But there was a big shock to like the culture change. There was a huge difference in terms of, what I was used to in my childhood. And I think really missing that sense of home and community and my friends and family, that was a big thing that I definitely felt during that move.
Mm-hmm. So, by the time did you find friends? Did you mingle with the community there? Probably in the school?
To be honest, it took me a couple years. It was a
Mm-hmm.
very, it was a very rough start. I think from 7 years old till about 12, I struggled. And then
Mm-hmm.
by that point, I really like had a nice group of friends and kind of let a bit more of my personality out. But yeah, I think I definitely had an identity crisis early on in those years.
Mm-hmm. Why I asked you this, because people just want to leave home, wherever they're based in, but they don't understand what the kids go through. We
Mhm,
think that that's the last thing to think of, but no, it really impacts
mhm.
kids. So that's why I asked you. Okay,
Absolutely.
so okay, so How was the life in Canada from that point on?
You know, I think by now so many people have immigrated to places like Canada that it's a little bit more spoken about. But at the time, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, when we moved in the 90s, everybody thought like, oh, you're leaving for this like dream life. And then you get there and realize like reality's not exactly that way.
Mm.
We had to work so hard. I watched my parents work hard. So I grew up very young uh, to actually see what they went through, to see how much of a struggle it is to just, I mean, this was a time before Google Maps and internet and everything. So they had to really like take what they could in their suitcase and start fresh and figure it out without like any maps, any guides, any information. And
Mm.
so that really like it was very sobering. It really made me grow up very quickly and realize like how harsh reality can be. And I feel like it's also instilled in me a lot of values as well that um, it just keeps me humble. It keeps me very like grounded to
Mm.
realize that not everything is as people say it will be, and to actually go through the process of completely like uplifting your life and going to a place that is not home to you, that isn't known to you, and it can be very harsh. I think that that reality taught me a lot and built a lot of character in me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, going to a new place and trying to make it your new home is really challenging, isn't it? Yeah, especially as a
Yeah,
kid.
absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, so how many years were you in Canada, Sarathi?
30 years.
30 years. And were you visiting Sri Lanka often, or how did it go?
I didn't actually get to. So after I left at 7 years old, I was 18 when I came back. So
Oh,
I was a different person. The country was a different place.
yes.
I'm actually the second of my cousins like that was born. And so
Mm-hmm.
most of my cousins I met for the first time in my life when I was 18. So there was a huge like disconnect. There was a
Yes.
lot of life that had just passed by during the time
Mm.
that I was gone, and but I was so excited. Like it's, I'd been waiting for my entire life to come back, and so it was really exciting to meet people, to see all the things that like my dad. I always say like people say like he had one foot in Sri Lanka and one foot in Canada, but like I say both his feet were there because like he is really what like built up my dream idea of like what Sri Lanka was because he talked about it so much. And when we went, he was like, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Everything." So he tried to like give me a taste of so we went to like Sigiriya, we went to like Siripada, we went to visit like every family member we could manage in the 2.5 months that we were here.
Okay, that's wonderful, Sarathi. And I want to know, coming from a developed country like Canada, the first time you landed in Sri Lanka, even though you had this love for the roots and all that, but how did you feel the difference? Did it just hit you like, oh, where am I? A third world country, or you were just amazed by what you saw?
To be honest, like there was so much excitement. When you come out of the airport and you feel that like first wave of humidity, I know some people don't enjoy that, but for me it was like, oh my gosh, like I'm home. So I love the heat. Like I live in a very cold country. No matter how
Mm.
hot Sri Lanka gets, I never complain because I know what it's like to have the opposite. So I
Mm.
definitely embrace a lot of what Sri Lanka offers. Even the things that a lot of people might find challenging, I get excited by. But I will say, my most stressful thing was the bathroom situation.
Mm. At the
I
airport, you
didn't
mean?
know what to expect. Just in general, like that was
Mm.
probably where I felt the most fear. Like,
Mm.
what are the bathrooms like? What happens if we're on the road? It's different if it's like at home, but we're always on
Mm.
the go, being on a trip like that. And so that was definitely a point of stress for me. I'm someone who like embraces it regardless. I try
Mm.
not to like get too much in my head about, whatever I'm uncomfortable with, because if I think too much about it, I'll like just make it so much worse. But yeah, the bathrooms and the bugs, like, I don't depending on which bug, I handle certain ones better than others.
Okay. I notice many people say this when they lived for so many years abroad. But for me, when I moved to Europe, I was like, where are the other animals, you know? But
That's
anyway,
true. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so Sarathi, so you came to Sri Lanka for the first time when you were 18, and then you traveled around with your family,
Mhm.
and let's say you fell in love with the country again. When did you feel like, okay, why am I in Canada? Why am I not in my country? Did you have a feeling like that, or how the process began?
I think even before I came back to Sri Lanka, I always believed I was coming back. Like I remember when I was a kid, I would like draw like because we still had our house here. So I would like draw
Mm,
like what our new upgraded house would look like. I would like
wow.
imagine, that life that I would have when we came back. And we never really had a plan. Like initially my mom had said, "Oh, let's get her to finish school here and then we'll go." And then high school happened and then it was, "Oh, let's finish high school." It was always a question of like, how would I adapt more than
Mm,
do we want to go back?
mm,
Because like I said, I had been to international school even back in Sri Lanka. So I learned an English medium. And the little bit that I knew, like I speak Sinhalese, but it's very conversational. If I
mm,
watch the news, if I listen to music, even some like dialogue in movies, like it's a much more complex version of Sinhalese that
mm.
I'm not able to understand and I'm not able
Okay.
to read and write it. And so
Mm,
that was really the biggest challenge of how do I adapt? How do I like, will there be like a way for me to kind of fit back into Sri Lanka? Because
mm,
I'd just completely grown up in a different culture and community, and we didn't have Sri Lankans around us. We were in a very,
mm.
um, it wasn't a very multicultural community. And so I always had this sense of seeking others that like looked at like me or were similar to me, but I never actually had access to that. So
Mm,
there was a big disconnect in terms of what that was like for me.
yeah. I observe that this happens to many kids who grow up in other countries, even though the family is still practicing the festivals, the food culture, probably the dressing culture. Sri Lankans don't, but Indians do mostly. But still, the kids get
Hmm.
lost between both worlds, you know. Were you someone like that
Hmm.
too?
Yeah, I'd say that's a really good way to put it. I always felt like I neither belonged there nor here.
Mm-hmm.
Because over there, especially physically over there, it's like so obvious that I'm an outsider. So when I went to Canada, because I had learned the British English system here, the way that I pronounced certain words was very different.
Mm,
And that was something I actually got bullied about very harshly.
mm,
And I made an active effort. Like all of my fear, all of the negative feelings that bullying gave me, I put into like figuring out how to speak more like them. And so I spent,
mm,
when you talked about whether that identity was an issue, I feel like I spent most of my life both seeking what my identity was, trying to learn about my culture just from my parents, essentially, because that was the only exposure I had. And
mm,
then also trying to understand where I fit in this other world and how I can blend in. It was less about being like them and more about just not bringing attention to the differences. Like I always tried to
mm.
like become a little bit more invisible. I always wanted to just like not bring attention to the things that like got me negative attention. And
Mm,
so I was always trying to figure out like how do I just blend in? How do I assimilate? How do I just kind of, coast under the radar?
Yeah, so when the Western countries or other countries, when they want people to migrate, yeah, they always label it as multicultural environment. But then when you go, you realize that you have to kind of erase yourself where you're coming from or what lifestyle you had all these years just to be one of them, try to be one of them.
Hmm.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about, that we have to think about the kids, what we are putting them through, the bullying and trying to
Yeah.
fit in a total new world altogether. Yeah, that's a good point you
Yeah.
raised, Sarathi.
And
Thank you.
and
Yes, go on.
Yeah, and sorry, on that note, I also want to mention, I agree with you about the fact that we don't spend enough time about how kids are affected by certain life changes.
Yes.
I'm always advocating for kids because I know what these things did to my development. And
Mm-hmm.
at an age that you're figuring out who you are, you're figuring out the world around us, I felt like I was living on two different lives, essentially, right? I would come
Mm-hmm.
home and my parents would want me to be the way that our culture is supposed to be. They would want me,
Mm.
they would want to instill certain values in me. They wanted me to behave a certain way. And then outside, I'm trying to pretend like none of that exists. I'm trying to
Yeah.
pretend like, no, I'm just one of you. I'm just the same. And I think when I was really young, that didn't show up as much. But as you get older and you're socializing outside of school, that
Yeah.
really, I felt that a lot where everyone else is socializing, but I'm not allowed to because my parents are
Mm.
more strict. And so, but then I don't want, it's embarrassing to acknowledge that. And so you're trying to pretend that you're somebody that you're not. You're trying to pretend like I understand all of these different social dynamics. I understand what it is that all the other kids are talking about, even though I'm not at the parties they're at, I'm not at the sleepovers they're at, I'm not going to the camping trips that they're going
Mm.
on, even the school trips, like overnight trips, I wasn't allowed on. And so there's a huge component of growing up that you miss out on when
Yeah.
a lot of parents try to keep kids a bit more sheltered with good
Yes.
reason. Like I do respect the reasons for wanting to shelter your kids, but
Mm.
I think that, like you said, we don't think about what's actually happening internally for
Yes.
that child. And
Yes.
so I really felt like I was living multiple personalities, multiple lives because of that.
Yeah, which could be painful or damaging. We never know. I mean, you were strong enough,
Hmm.
but another kid would have taken it in a different way and damaged herself. Like I said, we want to just move to a totally different country and have expose them to that culture and then have unrealistic expectation of the child following our culture in a foreign country, which I never understood. And also Sri Lankans want their kids to marry
Yeah.
another Sri Lankan. Guys, then just stay in Sri Lanka. I don't know.
Yeah. So like I said, I always wanted to come back. It was never a question of whether I would come back. It was a question of when and how.
Hmm.
And because of that disconnect that I had between the language and just not knowing, not having come to Sri Lanka often made it hard to understand what would
Hmm.
my life be like here. How would I adapt? What things would I, how do I make that happen? How do I make that a reality? And
Hmm.
also work, like how do I go into a country that I really know nothing about, even though
Hmm.
I have this deep connection to it. I don't understand how like the systems work. I'd be learning so many things, from scratch, and I didn't go through the same education system. So what does that mean? And
Hmm.
so there was always this question going back and forth. But it was actually 2 years back when I came here, and I'd been wanting to move here since the pandemic, but between the pandemic and the crisis, there was a lot of
Hmm.
plans that I had that kept getting delayed. And
Hmm.
so in 2023, when I came here, and I was very much living, I tried to live as if I already had moved here
Hmm.
because I was here for 3 months. I was trying to really embrace that lifestyle. And I feel like I just woke up one day and realized everything that I want is happening right now. I keep telling myself I have to make this big move, but I've already moved. Like I'm already here. I'm already living that lifestyle. And so it was really a shift that needed to happen for me of realizing that I'm overthinking it. It's actually so much easier than I expected. And
Hmm.
technology has a lot to do with that.
Hmm.
If I want to go somewhere, I can take an Uber. If I need to figure out where something is, I can use Google Maps, which didn't exist,
Hmm.
earlier on in my life when I was
Hmm.
trying to really understand this adjustment. But between those two things, I just realized there's nothing holding me back anymore. And so it was really just about embracing that.
Okay. I see a growth of expat kids. I don't know if you notice on social media. Not only Sri Lankans, but from everywhere. They move to cold countries specifically. and then they say, Mom, why did you think we would want to move there? Because they are all from either tropical countries or warm countries from the Middle East. Yeah, I see a growth in this. So, Sarathi, how do you feel about let's say, the present and when you first came? Do you feel like Sri Lanka has changed?
I see every time I've come to Sri Lanka, I see massive changes.
Mm-hmm.
I came in, so I left in 94. I came in 2005 and then 2011 and then to
Mm-hmm.
2023. So they were such massive changes between those years. Um, to be honest, I saw remnants of the crisis when I was back in 2023, but so much had developed already in such a short time. Um, I saw people's resilience a lot. I saw that a lot of what we used to get stuck on, maybe, a lot of some of the, how do I put this? I felt like people really changed what was important to them between the pandemic and the crisis and all these things that have happened. And I don't think that's specific to Sri Lanka. I think all over the world, a lot of us over the last 5 years have looked at what are we doing, what are we filling our lives with, and what's most important to us. And so there's
After
been a
the
massive
corona.
shift in, yeah, so I think there's been a massive shift for a lot of people, but I specifically saw because I came here exactly a year after the crisis happened. I saw just how much people changed. I saw that some of the things that used to matter a lot that maybe didn't fulfill people no longer was even a factor.
Mm.
But then I saw like just heart coming out of people. Like I saw how hard, like they had been through such a rough time. I can't imagine like when we're in Canada, we're watching everything on YouTube. So we're very much like living with the experience as like an observer. But
Mm.
regardless of how much you see these things, it's hard to know what it's like to actually live through it. No matter how many times I talk
True.
to my friends and check in on them, I don't know what they went through truly. I'm sitting in the comfort of my home as much as it's hurting me to see what's happening. But anytime there's been something that happened in Sri Lanka, I've always wanted to be here. Most people are like, oh, let's get out of here, or like, let's
Mm.
avoid going right now. But those kinds of things have always driven me to actually want to be here. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
that first trip that I took back when I was 18, the first time I came after leaving, it was 3 months after the tsunami happened. And so we actually had collected donations in Canada between our community around our temple. And our head monk from the temple was actually here at the same time. So we had the
Mm.
opportunity to actually go around with him and see, the effects of what had happened and actually try and support people in whatever way we could. And so all of those experiences, it just made me want to do more. And so every time I come here, even though I'm not working with a specific organization, actually in 2011 when I came, I was doing an internship because it was part of my university program.
Mm.
Um, so I was doing an internship with an NGO for about 6 weeks. And so every time I've come here, I've tried to reconnect to some sort of development cause here and understand where is my place in all this? Like, how can I help?
Mm.
Because it's a very Western way of thinking that like there's this whole savior mindset that we get taught in school that you need to come and rescue people. And so I struggled with being in a class of people that were seeing places like Sri Lanka as like a different place, something that was disconnected to them. But I
Mm.
was a representation of that culture, and so going back to that identity crisis, it was like everything that I was being taught was in a very Western mindset, but I understood the cultural dynamics that came with the kind of places that they were trying to support. And
Mm.
so I kind of criticized some of what they were saying as well, where a lot of the support that NGOs and development tries to do is very top down. It's we know how to help you, we know how to fix the problem, let us just
Mm.
take over. And I
Mm.
saw the damage that that was doing on the ground. And so I spent a lot of time to really like, along with my identity crisis, along with trying to understand where I fit in between the two worlds, I was also trying to see where is my place in helping, where does that fall so that I can understand how to help in a way that doesn't take over, doesn't diminish the actual experience of people here, and actually supports
Mm.
them and empowers them. Because I think that's what's
Mm.
missing in a lot of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's
They
not
need
what I ended
help,
up
but
doing with
not
my
a
career,
change.
by the way. Yeah.
Sorry, can you say it again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I said that's actually not what I ended up doing with my career, funny enough. A lot of that experience actually made me want to go completely in and out about the problems with NGOs and what a lot of these organizations say that they stand for and what happens in reality. And so it actually made me very cynical. And I took a big step back and I decided that if I'm going to do something like that, I'm going to do it on a personal level. And
Mm.
my career took a completely different direction, even though that's what I studied in university.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Beautiful. Yes, I can resonate with you because during the crisis, when the protest, Aragalaya was happening, I remember I was in Abu Dhabi and I was just watching 24/7, thinking that, wishing that I would have been there. I regretted it so much. And my husband thought I'm crazy.
Yeah.
But then you cannot explain this feeling, the bond we have, also because it was a very important milestone in our Sri Lankan life, I think. We just wanted a change and I was so into it. Thankfully, we
Yeah,
achieved it. Let's see how it goes.
no, I absolutely agree. And I think we're on the path, hopefully. But
Mm,
you're absolutely right, and I love the way that you put it, because I think a lot of people think that being in a physically different country, you disconnect from what's happening here. But we are very much living through it, and I think in a very confusing way, because we're observers, we're not participants in the process, and so
mm,
it's we're so emotional. And I same thing, like. So, and the other thing about me is, when the crisis happened, I was supposed to be on a flight that year, like
mm.
immediately before it happened, or and I still wanted to come here, and my mom was like, "Are you crazy? Like, you need to take a step back and wait until things get resolved." But I went to university for to study like global studies and peace and conflict resolution. So I had always believed that I would come back to Sri Lanka and help like make it better in some way. I didn't really understand how or what that
Mm.
would look like. Everybody thought I was crazy. I was ready to jump on a plane and come here. And they're like, "What are you going to do there?" I was like, "Protest?" Like, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know, but I just need to be there. Like it's like this. And I was crying a lot. Like I was very emotional. I was going through a lot of different emotions of what I was watching and feeling so disconnected from it, but just feeling this pull of wanting to be here so badly, but also having
Mm.
no idea what you're going to do when you get here. Like,
Yeah. I mean, you would have figured out because I'm sure all of us could have helped, but still, we are helping from abroad. One more thing I would like to add, Sarathi. Whenever I try to raise social issues, educate about social issues online, they tell me, if you left Sri Lanka, just be there, don't try to educate us. I disagree. Because we left Sri Lanka, we understand how other countries function and how many resources we have that could just easily bring us, I mean, make us better, our lives better, give us a comfortable life in terms of business, in terms of everything. So that's why we are trying to educate you guys,
mhm.
right? We've seen enough to compare these both
Yeah.
countries and
Yeah, and I think the fact that so many of us are all over the world now, and so many of us
mm,
have come back, and I see so much changing even in the Sri Lankan landscape, because now it's so normal to go abroad, whether it's for a few years and come back, or whether you've been there your whole life and come back.
mm,
I can see how much and when I say our, I mean here in Sri Lanka, I can see how much our landscape here is changing, because there's all these different influences, right? And we're
mm,
able to go uh, and learn. I don't want to say a better way. I think a different way, because I think
mm,
it's a lot of people assume that the West is a better way. In fact, a lot of my conversations with people that haven't always lived in Sri Lanka is, but I thought this and I thought that. but isn't Canada better because of this? But isn't the West better because of this? And I'm like, no, this is what we're told is better, and this is the actual reality of what we live. And I'm not saying that there aren't benefits. Like I'm not trying to put down going abroad or living in the West or Canada specifically. I can only speak to that experience. But I think there's a lot of assumptions that people make, and they think it's like this magical place where everything's just better and everything that just makes sense. But it's a struggle. Like a lot of people, and this is what a younger generation now happening, where they'll go straight from school and they'll go alone and they'll just not realize how hard life is. And when, we were a family and we struggled, but we at least had each other. But when I see young kids go, they're completely isolated and they're talking to their families back home and they're saying, life's hard, it's this, it's that. And their families don't get it. And they can't understand it because nobody really understands it until you do it. But a lot of times I think the mental health of these kids are actually getting really broken down because now they're suffering by themselves. They feel isolated. They don't have anyone. And the people that they do have and lean to for support back home are really dismissing them without knowing any better. And, depending on the dynamic that you have with your family, that can be very toxic. There's so many different ways that could go. And even the most supportive families just might not understand. And so they might not know how to support someone in that situation. And, not to go really dark, but I think it's important to bring up these issues because in Canada, just in the last year or two, there was a kid that killed an entire family. And we don't really know why. We don't really understand with the mental state of what happens to people when they go abroad and they don't have a proper support system. Like, I don't know the story. I don't know the details. I'm just speaking more broad way of what I know what it's like to struggle with mental health. And,
No, you are making a very valid point
that,
here.
I adapted well. You said earlier that it's good that I adapted well and that, I was strong, but the reality was that when I was a kid, I wasn't. I was feeling very suicidal at 9 years old. I thought about it a lot and I knew that I didn't have the courage to do it. And so I would wish for years, like from age 9 to 12, I used to wish a car would hit me because then it wasn't in my hands. It wasn't something that I had to do. It was something that just happened to me. And if I'm feeling that kind of pressure at such a young age with a family, I can't imagine what these kids are going through. And I think, it doesn't matter how old you are. I think we need to really give support to what it's like for whether you're a child or an adolescent or a teenager or someone in your 20s. I think it's really important to really understand what that does to your mental health and what it does to feel that isolation. And maybe it's even harder when you're in your teens and 20s, right? Because now you've already grown up a certain way and you're trying to completely change. Whereas for me, I was still developing, I was still discovering the world around me. So maybe it was easier for me, even though it was still very hard for me. I watched my brothers. My brothers were 16 and 20 when they moved, and I saw the difference in how we adapted because they had already known a certain life here. And so I think everybody at different ages will deal with all kinds of different ways of how this comes up. And hopefully now with social media and the internet and everything, we're more connected, but sometimes that could actually be polarizing and negative as well. So I think I really appreciate what you're trying to do here in bringing up these conversations, because I think it's one of the most important things that we could do for the youth and the kids.
So yes, Sarathi, to add to what you were saying, yes, before there was a difference in opportunities a Sri Lankan would get compared to a Canadian, right? But now in this current situation, how the world is going about, I feel like everything is accessible and available in Sri Lanka as much as in a Western country. It is about how you make your life in a country, right? But if we talk about the positive side of
Yeah.
it, the social connections or the human connections you will get in Sri Lanka is nothing close to that in any Western country. In my personal experience, you can share your input on that. Also, when we talk about the opportunities, right? Now we are all connected digitally. You can sit in Sri Lanka and work as a digital nomad for a company in Australia or Canada. And I do encourage our young people to travel, backpack, or see the world. But honestly, the motto of this channel is to tell people who are living abroad for so many years, like me, they're hesitant to come back to their own place, their motherland. I just want to tell them that there are people who did this, and it's not the end of the world. It's actually possible. And in fact, it could probably be healthy for you, for your mental health. I mean, in Sri Lanka, we live very close to the nature. We live with the nature. Our food is still, thank God, it's organic, right? And I mean, when I go to supermarkets here, all I see is things in plastic packaging. Like let's say an orange is peeled and packed in plastic. I'm like, why? It has a peel naturally. So these kind of things really disturb me. I get this question about, are we eating the right thing here? Are we talking to the right people? Because the lack of social connection will push you to just make anybody your friend, but it could be toxic for you. Whereas in Sri Lanka, the neighbor is kind to you, the auntie in the shop is kind to you, the uncle selling tambali could smile at you in the morning. These kind of positive changes you really feel when you're in Sri Lanka. That's why even the foreigners say, oh, when I come here, I feel like I'm so relaxed and this peaceful aura around me. What do you think about this?
I agree with like everything that you said, and I think it just goes to show, regardless of which country you've gone abroad to, we have this like pull back to Sri Lanka, right? And you're
Mm,
absolutely right. That social community, I think I see how much of a change not having that throughout my life
mm,
made in me, and it's also what I like seeked when I come back every time.
mm,
Most of my trips, I spend months here when I used to come on these trips, but I'm not rent like everyone's like, oh, did you go and see this place? Did you go and do this? And I'm like, no, I spent time with family because that's what I craved so much.
mm.
I wanted to make up for all the lost years with them, right? And
Way overdue
especially
for
when you
you.
lose people, it really,
Mm,
yeah, way overdue. But we've lost a lot of people that were close to us, and they were
mm,
people that we made plans with. And so when you have not only like when you have these long gaps of time when you don't get to see them, but these like unrequited plans with them now because they're gone. You can never get that back, right? You can never make up for
mm,
that time. And
mm.
then even grieving these people when you're not here, it's grief is very different when you're on the outside looking in.
Yes.
And I feel like a lot of people that I've lost, I start to grieve them again when I land in Sri Lanka, regardless of how many years it's been since I lost
Mm,
them.
mm,
And it's a very strange place to be. It's because other people actually went through that experience, but
mm,
you just received some information and those kinds of things are not things that you put pictures or videos of. So there's a lot that you're not a part of.
mm,
And so I really struggled with that a lot, actually. And but that just kind of drove that fire in me even more to come back, to prioritize that, and it's what you said, it's that social connection, to try to recover from it. What they tell you is the most necessary thing is social connection.
mm,
So it's it's not only is it something that we feel, and something that pulls us back here, but if you actually read into the theories behind a lot of the things that we're struggling with on a massive scale, like anxiety, depression, and all these things, that's what's at the
mm.
root of it. It's that we've lost social connection.
Yes. Yes. Like as kids, as Sri Lankan kids, instead of having to go to a therapist, we would talk to our cousin. So in this, I just remembered, like you said,
Yeah.
you have cousins in Colombo, and when you came back to thinking of settling down, how did you renew this connection physically being in Sri Lanka?
There were some challenges. The thing with my mom is every year, on certain holidays, on birthdays, she would write letters.
Mm,
And when we were kids, she would tell us to write. We were babies when I moved out of Sri Lanka, but we have this like long time connection because throughout our lives we always send letters, and we would our families would like exchange pictures. This is before social media and everything, so this is
yeah.
how like all credit goes to my mom for actually doing this, because I think that's what really kept that connection strong for so long.
Mm, mm-hmm,
And then, once social media happened, little by little, we start to see what the day to day of our lives is like.
mm,
Some of my really young cousins, I'm still not like as close to as you would expect to be, because
mm-hmm,
we're very much getting to understand who each other are. There's a lot of time that's missed. And even when I'm here, I do have a large family, thankfully. I have a lot of family and friends that I want to spend time with. And so because of that, my time gets split between certain people. And so I
mm,
don't necessarily get as much time with everyone that
mm,
but that from day one, like through those letters, through emails, through social media, that connection never died. And so that is a big part of what kept me going all those years. So even though physically we don't have that social connection,
mm,
I feel like a lot of what I really thrived on was because of that. And
mm.
there were people that I kept in touch with all like throughout my life. And if something got, difficult, I would reach out to them and we'd talk, and we'd have video calls, like now more in like the last decade,
Mm.
that's been possible. But I think technology can be amazing in that way. It
Yes,
bridges those gaps.
yes, that's beautiful. Yeah. Okay, now let's get into the pros and cons. Now, I want you to focus only Canada and Sri Lanka, yeah? Tell us about the pros of living in Sri Lanka first.
Mhm. So, living in Sri Lanka, for me, what drove me here, apart from, the family, friends, and the
Mm-hmm.
social connection, was I needed some sense of balance in my life, and I felt like I wasn't able to achieve that in Canada.
Mm,
I was someone who really believed in the hustle culture. Like I was burning the candle at both ends. I was working really hard, but not very smart. I was
mm,
basically driving myself to the ground. And this was all pre-pandemic. Pandemic
mm,
really like forced me to stop and wake up and kind of
mm,
evaluate what's most important in my life and the way that I'm spending my time in my life. And that's why I said, since 2020, I've wanted to move here because it was very obvious to me. We have spent our entire lives in Canada trying to rebuild a mini Sri Lanka there. We're trying to bring the different types of food there. We're trying to bring, the community aspect. We're trying to bring the like holidays and celebrations. And we're trying to do so much. And it's more expensive. It's more of an effort. It's not even the same experience,
mm,
but we're trying to build that in Canada. And I was like, well, why don't I just go to Sri Lanka where it actually exists, right? Instead of this knockoff version. Um, and Canada, the population number, so it's easier now to have that cultural connection. But for most of my life, that didn't exist. For
mm,
most of my life, I felt isolated. Um, I felt like I didn't want to be there. I if I didn't if I didn't come back to Sri Lanka, I always knew I would go somewhere else. Like Canada never felt like the right place for me, even though I spent
mm,
the majority of my life there.
mm,
Sure was the obvious place to come back to, but um, you know, recently I realized like we work so hard in Canada, like we'll work the entire year to convince our jobs to give us like 7 or 14 days of holiday time. We'll go like to the Caribbean, for example, if we want to go, like
Mm.
I'm a big beach lover, so for me, like the automatic place to go for a small vacation is to the beach.
Mm.
So we go to like Mexico or Jamaica or Dominican, this thing to that experience physically, like geographically to us. And then it's like, okay, we get this small amount of time and then we're back to reality, right? We're back
Mm.
to this like stressful existence.
Mm.
But if I lived in Sri Lanka, I knew at that point if I could work hard and I could work harder, but then I could go to the waterfall, I could go to the beach, I could go climb a mountain, I could just go sit in nature. It's everywhere, right? Like
Mm.
there's so much beauty. There's so many
Mm.
things I haven't even discovered about Sri Lanka still to this day.
Same
And
here.
so it's almost like, so I felt like I could spend every moment that I have like of free time off from work exploring, and I would still probably like never run out of places. And so, and I'm not saying, you made a good point about people needing to go travel. I think you need to have left whatever your home country is at least once in your life.
Mm.
I think having that perspective of what it's like outside of wherever you're born is important. But I don't think that moving abroad is necessary anymore. I don't think that it's what
Mm.
it gives the opportunities that it used to. I don't think it's necessary the way that it used to be. You can work you can work remotely here. There's Westerners coming here to work remotely, so why aren't more
Exactly.
Sri Lankans working remotely?
Mm.
Um, and making that opportunity for themselves. And there's so many businesses you could open up here. And I know, there's certain structural things that need to change to give more people access to those things.
Mm.
I think what's really sad about some of the situations here is that it's easier for a foreigner to come in and start a business illegally than it is for a local person to actually do it legitimately.
Oh,
So I
yes.
think, there's a lot of improvement that Sri Lanka can make, but I
Mm.
think it is just a hub of opportunity. I think there's so much untapped potential when it comes to what the country could be, what the government could be, what people can be, and what like careers could be for people here.
Mm. Mm.
And
Mm. Mm.
it's exciting for me to actually see that transitioning. I feel like over the last 10 years, I've seen that happen
Yes.
naturally. So I'm really excited by that, and I'm excited to see where that goes.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing, Sarathi, people who want to go to cold countries, let's say, they don't understand the depth of that feeling of being cold because Sri Lankans always have the sun. We are blessed with the sun. This is something they totally undermine. And when they go there, I think they suffer because I've seen pictures and videos of people complaining about it. Was that a
Yeah.
pro for you?
I don't like the cold. I've never liked the cold. In fact, even when I'm in Sri Lanka and we go to like New Delhi or somewhere, and I'm in like a hoodie and I'm like dressed really warm, people make fun of me. They're like, "Aren't you from Canada? Why are you cold?" And I'm like, "Yeah, living in Canada doesn't make you susceptible to the cold. I don't like it there. I don't like it anywhere.
Mm,
I love New Delhi, but I like to be. I'm a very warm body. I love
mm,
like no matter how hot it is, even if I am uncomfortably hot, I still don't complain because I would much rather be hot than cold.
mm,
But you know, if I could describe, if someone watching this has never experienced the cold, um, when I'm in Canada and in the summer, if someone complains to me that it's too hot, what I always say is, talk to me when you can't feel your face. Talk to me when it
yeah.
hurts to breathe in.
Mm,
Um, because that is how the most extreme version of the cold has been.
mm,
That when it's like those minus like 20, 30 degree days, if you take a breath in, it actually like burns in your nose. Like it hurts.
mm,
Your bones hurt, like your body aches. And it's snow is pretty. Snow is very
yeah.
pretty, but if you're in the cold and you have to function in the cold, it's a very different experience.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and what's really sad about it is there's days sometimes you avoid going outside because it's so cold. And when I'm in Sri Lanka, like I think about those days sometimes and it baffles me. It's like going outside is just so normal here, right? Like I go
Mm.
outside 20 times a day, but over
With a
there might
t-shirt.
be a day that I don't step outside. Yeah, exactly. So and that has a big impact on mental health as well. We don't see the
Mm.
sun all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And not to say that winter doesn't automatically mean there's no sun. We do get the sun in the winter, but it's just a darker, like colder, just more depressing
Mm.
environment.
Mm.
And if you're not someone that loves the cold, it can be really challenging. And also,
Mm.
if you're having to go to work every day, you don't have a choice. Like your car could be covered in snow. You have to clean that off. Your
Mm.
your driveway where you park the car might be
Mm.
covered in snow. You have to clean that off. Sometimes in Sri Lanka, someone might complain, "Oh, it's raining. I'm not going to step outside." But you can't do that if your day to day means, you have to deal with the snow. And it's also like scary to drive in the snow. Like I've been in
Mm.
accidents before, and
Mm.
when you felt your car spin, when you feel your car going out of control, it makes you a lot more hesitant and nervous the next time you're going to drive. And so there's a lot of different aspects to a cold lifestyle that a lot of people don't realize. But
Yeah.
when you do migrate, you don't have a choice because now you've left this life that was comfortable to you and you
Mm.
made this choice to make a change. Some people sell their house and completely like uproot their entire lives. So you you come to Canada or a place like that, and even if you regret it, even if you're like, I had no idea this is what I was signing up
Mm.
for, you're forced
You
to deal
cannot
with
go
it, right?
back.
You're forced to
Yes.
like, no,
Mm-hmm. I would like to add
yeah.
something, Sarathi. I feel like the reason is
Hmm.
we romanticize these Christmas movies, the snow, the cold, the colorful caps and hats and all that. But they don't understand that in cold countries, the rain will be cold. Not like in Sri Lanka with the sunlight bliss, there is the sound of rain. No, no, no. Rain will be cold too. And the
Yeah.
wind comes with it, and the layers and layers of clothes you have to put up with every time you go out, right? None of this happens in
Oh
Sri
yeah.
Lanka. Just go out with a t-shirt and a short. 2 hours from Kandy, you will have the beach, or 2 or 3 hours, I don't know. And 3 hours from there, you will be in a
Yeah.
totally different place. In other countries, it's impossible. So, yeah, that's another thing.
Yeah.
What about the infrastructure and healthcare and I see like people go to gym. Young people like you would want to go to gym or other activities. How do you find it compared to Sri Lanka, Canada, in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen so much of that like already developed. Like I wouldn't even say it's developing. I see like even from while I was in Canada, I can see it on Instagram. I can see like the fitness community and how much people are embracing those kinds of lifestyles. When it comes to healthcare, I've been, you know, I've been through a lot in my life between my health and my father's health that has
Mm,
made me very familiar with the healthcare system. Um, and I'm not going to say that the Western healthcare system is like terrible.
mm,
My father's alive today because of it.
mm,
He's gone through like 20 years of heart conditions, and he has literally, um, you know, we've lost him, and he's been revived. And so, funny enough, I actually prefer the healthcare in Sri Lanka, which a lot of people find shocking. Um, and part of that is that very much to Ayurveda. And so that's something that
mm,
doesn't exist in Canada.
mm-hmm,
And so I've sought a lot of information to try to understand the more natural remedy. But the last couple of years, I've had to go do, certain like tests in hospitals, and it is so efficient. Like I can go get an X-ray and they'll hand me the X-ray and I'll be out of there in like a half an hour. In Canada, I have to like wait a week or two to see my family doctor, wait for them to refer me to like a lab to go do the tests, wait for an appointment for the test, and then some like I don't get the test in hand. A report gets sent to my family doctor. So if I actually want to take charge of my own health and I want to be more involved in my personal health care, I have to really fight to get access to those things. There are some systems now where we can get certain records, but even like a couple months ago, I was really fighting to get my father's medical records while he was still admitted to the hospital. And they said, no, you'll get it when he leaves. And I said, I can't wait until he leaves. I need it now. And there was no system in place for me to do that. I had to like go talk to like 5 different departments and beg and plead and really push to even get access to those things. So, I know that systematically we have things to improve in Sri Lanka. I know there's been things that have gone wrong in the medical system in the past, but in terms of convenience, in terms of me feeling like I have more control over my health, in terms of, feeling more empowered in the process. And you have to advocate for yourself. You can't like, I've learned how to advocate for myself. And so I'm able to do that. I'm not saying just blindly follow what any doctor says, because there are doctors with egos that don't like if you ask too many questions. So, I can't say on a broad level that things are a certain way in one country and things are a certain way in another country. Both countries have benefits, they have negatives, but I think no matter what, having systems where you can empower yourself and you can take charge, allowing that space, where I see Sri Lanka doing so much better than Canada.
So, Sarathi, what about the infrastructure and the availability of goods? Moving from Canada, do you find things that you found in the West easily in Sri Lanka now?
I do find a lot of things here more commonly than I used to. I do find certain things are more expensive, but I mean, they're imported, so that comes with the territory. So I definitely see a big difference in terms of access.
And what about the Sri Lankan food? I'm sure your mom made, you grew up with eating Sri Lankan food probably. Do you like it in Sri Lanka,
Yeah.
where it's a little bit more spicy than there probably?
Yeah, definitely a bit more spicy. It's funny, even when it's not Sri Lankan food, what I love about Sri Lanka is that like there's a sushi place that I love going to, and the way that they spice things, I can no longer eat sushi in Canada because there's a little like subtle Sri Lankan flavor to it. That when I actually went back to Canada and tried to have sushi, I just wasn't enjoying it the same. I can't say one country is better than the other when it comes to food, because the thing that I love about Canada and specifically Toronto, which is close to where I'm from, is that you can pick any cuisine in the world and you're guaranteed to be able to find some restaurant or takeout place where you can have that. So, that's something that I haven't found in most places when I've traveled. That's something that like is incredible and speaks a lot to how multicultural we are over there. But there's just certain flavors in Sri Lanka that, especially that they're fresh. Since you brought up my mom's cooking, we would often cook certain things, but it would be a canned version of it, right? Like if we wanted to have certain things that we can't necessarily have, like the fresh fruit. Jackfruit's a perfect example. So instead of having like fresh jackfruit, it would come out of a can and then she would cook it. Actually, the jackfruit, when it's like, I'm talking about that you cook, but even the one that you eat like as like a sweet, right?
Fruit, yes.
Like the fruit version of it, when we get it in a can in Canada, it has the same flavor, but it's very hard and rubbery. Like the texture of it, it kind of like, you're like, yes, this is the same flavor, but I'm just not enjoying eating it anymore, right? Like it just doesn't have the same texture. There's something that not being as fresh or being canned is doing to you, right? And also it's just not as healthy to have a canned vegetable or fruit versus the real thing from a tree. And I remember when we were kids, we would literally eat off of the trees that like were on our land, like around our house. So that's definitely something that I really appreciate about the lifestyle in Sri Lanka, just to be able to pick something off a tree and be able to eat it.
True. So, To wrap up the conversation, Sarathi, do you have a message for Sri Lankans living abroad, um, who are undecided or confused, like whether to go back or stay here? I mean, time is never right unless you decide that this is the time for you. So, do you have some message to these people since you have done
Hmm.
it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think if I could share anything from my own personal experience, it was even for me as someone who was really excited to do it. There was no doubt in my mind whether I wanted to do it or not, but I was so stuck on the how and what it would look like and whether it would work or not. And
Mm,
I think there's enough infrastructure here. I think there's enough. It's easy enough here that people just need to stop overthinking. If it's something that you
mm,
genuinely want, I think it's a very easy decision. Now, obviously, changing the life that exists in whatever place they're in is probably a challenge. But I
mm,
mean, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, like people uprooted their lives and left without knowing anything about what was waiting on the other side. I
mm,
think we are way too, I think we're a generation that thinks way too much and worries way too much about what if something goes wrong. We have so many tools and resources if that does go wrong. We
mm,
have so many options. It's almost like we have too many options and people want to like almost pave the right path and we don't allow ourselves to just be in that experience. And obviously if you have like small kids or teenagers, like education, like what happens to their education, those are probably things that a lot of people are concerned about. And my parents were concerned about the same thing when I was younger. But if I
mm,
had a choice back then, if it was up to me, it wouldn't matter because the thing is, I moved to Canada and I went through bullying and I went through like some of the hardest things a kid could go through. And I adapted. I figured it out. So why wouldn't I adapt back into
mm.
Sri Lanka, right? I think
In your
my
home,
parents
in your
worried for a
own
long
country.
time. Yeah, my parents worried for a long time that having to reshift me back, I wouldn't adapt, that it would really mess up my education or it would kind of throw me off, whatever path that I was on. But I think if I had moved here sooner, I think I would have been, I would have gotten to enjoy the things that I wanted to so much more.
Mm,
I don't regret it. Like I'm not someone that lives with regrets. Like my life took the path that it did, and I'm happy to be where I'm at. But I think we spend way too much time not doing the things that we want to do because we think
yeah,
that there's something in the way, and usually we are the ones that are in our own way. Um,
perfect. Yes.
and yeah, and if someone can, come here and live here for a couple months to test it out, I think that's great. I don't think
Mm,
everyone has the benefit of being able to do that,
mm,
because when you leave your home country, or like I'm saying home country, assuming that's where someone's lived for their whole life, but whatever
mm,
it is, if wherever your home is that you're trying to shift back to Sri Lanka from, if you're in Sri Lanka for several months, you have expenses over there, right? So it's like it's
mm,
not always easy for someone to take a long
mm,
vacation here. But
mm,
I think try and integrate into whatever way that you can. Everything's online now. You can kind of. So one thing that I did actually in prep for this was like almost like online shop to see how much do things cost. Like just trying to do my
mm,
own research of understanding um, where what's available here, what's not available, what kind of budget would I need for X, Y, and Z every month. So there's everything's available on the internet now, so that you can really like if you are an over planner, at least put some like concrete information behind that and kind of get out of your head, right? Like stop the overthinking and be a little bit more strategic and focus more on what you can control. But I mean, I love it here. I don't see why, if that's what someone wants to do, I don't see what would hold them back from actually doing that.
mm.
Life's
In
too
my
short
opinion,
to be where you don't want to be.
yeah, true. Um, in my opinion, Sarathi, I advocate for Sri Lankans who are able and to come back to Sri Lanka also because I feel like now it is the time to contribute back to our country. We benefited from free education, free healthcare, and everything beautiful Sri Lanka offered. Also, the personality that built us, like most Sri Lankans can cook and multitasking and very smart, in fact. So I feel like this
Yeah.
is the time to give back to the country for those who can move. And the experience and the knowledge we bring from other parts of the world can really make changes in Sri Lanka. You know, we can educate others. They don't necessarily have to go to another country if they don't have the means to learn, because we can educate them, we can help, we can volunteer. You know, there is so much we can give back to our country, is what I think. Um,
Yeah.
Okay, so everything is good, but let's talk about the things that can improve in Sri Lanka, in your opinion, Sarthi.
Yeah. I think, you know, so I'm someone, I'm someone that always wanted to see improvements in Sri Lanka.
Mm,
And I didn't think politics was the way. I was very much against politics. I believed anyone in the political system in some way, shape, or form benefited in a negative way, and that's why they are where they are. I was very critical of it. And I think, like I said, I worked with NGOs in the past, and I believed that that was the path to some sort of improvement. And then I learned a lot about what happens in reality, and I saw that a structure can stand for something, but what actually happens in reality can be completely different. So
mm,
there's a lot of cynicism that I had to deal with, that I had to process, that I had to really like sit with. Um, and I think the way that I was taught for most of my life in the Western system, I wanted to come to Sri Lanka and very much like what you said about helping, right? How do I help? How do I give back? But actually, spending more time here the last few years, I've come to realize it already exists here. We just need to really empower the voices that are already doing the hard work on the ground.
mm,
Um, and I think, in Canada alone, we have like when you look at the Sri Lankan community, any business you go to, especially restaurants and like IT and like certain industries, you look at who's running things and it's Sri Lankans. Like it's kind of funny. And so I see that here now, right? Like because I'm spending more time here, I try very hard to be more of an observer so
mm,
that I can understand what already exists as opposed to coming in with what I think should be the solution.
mm,
Because a solution in one place might not be the solution in another place. And so I've been really trying to understand what is the natural landscape here, what are the systems that exist here, and why don't some of those systems work, right?
mm.
And we still have a lot of colonial mindsets. Like if you go down south in Sri Lanka, for example,
Totally.
locals get treated differently.
Mm,
The like tourists are, and when I say tourists, it's not even, the way people are determining what tourists are is very much based on the color of their skin.
mm,
The largest tourist population is actually Indians to Sri Lanka
mm,
right now.
mm,
And so
mm,
that doesn't even apply, right? So it's like people make assumption about one thing and like there's a way that things run because of that assumption, but in
mm,
reality, it's a different picture. So I think I see changes and I see like the old system being very rigid and still like having a lot of control in some of these situations. For example, a foreigner can come, um, you know, give a bribe or something, start a business and stay off the radar because nobody really wants to cause a problem because they're tourists. And so they're
mm,
more respected. They're put on a pedestal, right? They're given a lot more leeway than a local would. If a local person is like a Sri Lankan national is trying to go to start a legitimate business, they're sitting in like all these different lineups. They're trying to follow the protocols. They're getting all kinds of, pushback in terms of bureaucracy or other things. And so I think the potential for people are there. I think there's a lot of people that want to do things. I
mm,
think that our system needs to be better adapted to actually give them that opportunity and empower them in that. And I hope that there's a system change coming. Um, it's hard to tell, and these things take time. But
mm,
I think if I think for me, I don't think we can keep waiting for a government or someone else to fix it for us. I think
mm,
we can take a look in our, whatever neighborhood, whatever community that we're part of, figure out how to fix that. And once you
Mm.
can, there's too much thinking of fixing anything at once. But once you can fix a small thing, look at how you can expand that. And how can we kind of create a network? We are a huge network between the Sri Lankans here, the ones that go abroad to study, the ones that have lived abroad forever. Like there's so much accesses and opportunity. So if we can actually build a network around that as opposed
Mm.
to trying to bring each other down, I think that it's a very easy solution.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sarathi, I remembered something. Since you
Hmm.
studied in Canada, right? You got education from there. I want to take the conversation to education now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I will first explain why I think like this. So I know someone who, when found out that I am moving to Sri Lanka soon for good,
Hmm.
I have a 10-year-old son, and the person asked me, "Oh, your son will blame you when you take him there, when you educate him there." And I was like, why? Because most of the Western countries, the big company CEOs are from the global south, where they got free education. Mainly, let's talk about India or African countries. They got free education, where we think like these are third world developing countries. But what I find as a beauty in our education system is we are very multitasking people. They don't just teach you the theories or what's in the book. I mean, they do that too. Education really has to change in Sri Lanka, but also I feel like we learn from the social, what do you say, our community, our human connections, how to fix something when it's broken, how to mend your clothes, how to cook, how to clean, and these kind of life skills. So the schools, even our schools, emphasize on. I remember when I was a kid, in first grade, we were asked to grow mung beans and see how it grows, and mark the progress and everything. But now I notice, especially in the Western world, some people don't even know where cashew come from, or the food come from, the ingredients come from. So I feel like in my personal opinion, our education system teaches not only what's in the book, but also life skills to survive. What is your opinion on that, since you studied in Canada?
Hmm.
And when you observe now your cousins or the current young generation in Sri Lanka, do you agree with me or disagree?
I think you put that perfectly, actually. I think that is a huge thing that we are missing in the West. I think the West is set up so systematically that you have to streamline like what you're interested in, and it's so focused, but it actually makes us more narrow-minded. It makes
Mm,
us not understand anything that is outside of that, right? And so whether that's the education system and you're picking like the education stream that you're going into, like even when I was in university, I had a lot of friends that were in different, they were studying in different departments, and I saw some such big differences. Like I was an art student.
mm,
I had friends who were in business, had science, and in math and in engineering, and I saw much like there was a difference in the way we thought, in the way we adapted, and in the way that we analyze information. And I think a lot of these skills need to be interdisciplinary. I think, you know, even if study all those things, they don't have the space in their curriculum to actually do that. So I really don't like how the system is so narrow-minded in Canada. I didn't really experience the Sri Lankan education system except for like the first few years of my life. So
mhm,
I can't necessarily speak to what going through that is like. But what I did notice, as soon as I got to Canada, I was doing long division. And when I was placed in my class, they were really confused about where to place me because my age determined that I should be in a specific class. My knowledge was way beyond that. And I actually
mm,
ended up very bored the first year. I was very good at math, and I ended up hating math like towards high school because I lost a lot of that knowledge. I lost a lot of that interest because the way that they taught math was at such an like earlier stage, like
mm,
than what I was used to.
mm,
And so I really lost interest in a subject that initially like had so much excitement for.
mm,
Um, and just in a lot of different ways. Like if you even, after school, once you're in a career, everything's departmentalized, right? Everybody
Mm,
knows like what their job is, but nobody knows what happens outside of that. And I think
mm,
that's a huge hindrance. And what you brought up about how people just know life skills here, um, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you've read all the same textbooks, right? You can figure
mm,
out that kind of information. But if you know how to learn, if you know how to like explore and discover things, you can like it's endless, right? How
mm,
intelligent you can be. And I think that's what we miss out on in the West. You're not
mm,
taught how to learn. You're taught to memorize and like regurgitate. Sorry, you're not taught how to learn. You're taught how to memorize and give back the exact same information in the exact same way that they want.
mm.
Whereas here, when I interact with my friends and my cousins and everybody, I see how they interpret information in such a different way.
So, Sarathi, so lovely to have you in this episode. And I know we can talk about many things for hours, but our time is limited. Yes, so when I come, I'm hoping to see you in Sri Lanka. And I hope this episode could be helpful for people, Sri Lankans in Canada, to make that decision, to give Sri Lanka a chance. It's not that bad, guys. Give it a chance. Okay, so thank you, Sarathi, and I hope you will enjoy the new year, Sinhala Urdu, Sinhala and Tamil Urdu in Sri Lanka. And thank you for being here and sharing your experience, sharing your story.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think what we've been discussing today is so important, and I'm appreciative of you having me on here and for sharing this information with so many people.